Hi everyone, and welcome to the Office 365 and Libraesva archiving tutorial video. We're going to go through a few things today when there's 4 key steps to making this all work. Step 1 will be our sort of first time setup and our SMTP configuration. The next one will be setting up our authentication with Office 365. Next, we'll be setting up the journaling rules. And then lastly, we'll be doing a full mailbox retrieval so we can get all of that old email that's stored in your 365. Let's jump straight into this one. So the first thing we want to do is set up the SMTP configuration, and this is so that we can send notifications out from the archiver. By default, with Office 365, it's smtp.office365.com, the port is 587, and the encryption is TLS. Then you just stick a username and password in and select your from address. After that, we're going to want to make ourselves a brand new tenant. This tenant will house configuration, users, and other settings just specifically for this tenant. Go to Settings, Tenants, and create a new tenant via the wizard option. Here we're going to add in a tenant name, administrator email, our alerts email, and we're just going to add in every single domain that we need to archive. So in this case, we're going to do 365demonstration.com and also .co.uk. We're going to encrypt the archive, and you're going to want to take a note of this decryption key because from this point onwards, you're not going to be able to get this back again. I'm going to stick it in the additional notes field for now just so I have access to it, but this is a demonstration. But don't worry about that now, but make sure you keep that somewhere safe. Here, we're going to enable advanced privacy management. We're going to put in our privacy manager's name, their telephone number, and their email. And because we set up SMTP configuration earlier, they will be sent a QR code that needs to be scanned. And then they'll scan that, set it up, and we'll have privacy management in the system and ready to go. Next, we'll choose Office 365. And due to the complex nature of setting up Office 365, we'll just skip the configuration now. Double check all your settings and hit configure. By default, it's configured us some volumes, it's configured us some archiving and retention rules by default, so we don't need to worry about that. Next is to set up the authentication and app registration. Hop on over to your Azure portal and search for app registration. Create a new registration, name it something to do with the archive. Select only accounts in this organizational directory. You can leave the redirect URL blank at the moment. We'll be coming back to this later and inputting something else into this box. We're going to copy the application client ID here because we'll need that later to set up the authentication. So I'm going to put it in this notepad. And then we'll go to certificates and secrets and we'll create ourselves a new client secret. We'll set the expiry to never because we don't plan on ever changing this, and just give it some sort of description. Copy that secret. Then we're going to give ourselves some permissions. We're going to go to Microsoft Graph, application permissions, and we're going to search for the term user. All we need is the read all users information. So user.read.all, that's all we'll need. We'll add the permission, and you need to grant the consent of the admin. That's all done. So we'll go over to the archiver, go to settings, 365, and we'll actually create the name of the connection. The tenant is the full on Microsoft.com domain that you have, in this case, demonstration lab. We'll paste in the application ID and the client secret. We'll leave the filter blank because we just want to absorb all users. And also we'll set the default role to user. This means that anyone logging in via Office 365 will by default have the user privilege. So the next step is actually setting up that 365 authentication. Over here you see a cog and it will give you parameters for the Office 365 connection. You'll click that and you'll copy this. This is what needs to go into the redirect URL space that we mentioned earlier. So we'll replace that, save it, and then we can test by navigating to the archiver, putting in one of the email addresses from Office 365, and then hitting go. Here you can see me testing by putting in one of the 365 email addresses, and it doesn't let me put in a password, and it says go and sign in with Office 365. Step 3 is to actually set up the journaling. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up our NDR or undeliverable journal reports. We need to select an address here that we don't mind not being archived because any reports that can't be delivered will be stored in this mailbox and we won't be able to archive that. So in this case, I'm just going to select archiver at 365demonstration.com just because that's an account that I have left over and that I don't need archived. Next, we'll create the SMTP listener. Navigate to the SMTP listener section and create a new record. Set it to SPF authentication, and the domain that you put in here is the same domain as the email address that you put in the NDR record earlier. Change the type to SMTP journaling and set it to active. Now we want to set up a Mailflow connector to send email from Office 365 to us. We'll set it from 365 to a partner organization. We'll give it just a generic name. And the only when messages are sent, this will be anything sent to your fully qualified domain name. In this case, it's archiver.isvacloud. And then we'll route email through the smart host, and we want to send it to the archiver, which is just the same thing. So we'll put in the fully qualified domain name again here. We'll switch off TLS, and this is mainly due to a port issue with Office 365. It's nothing to worry about. And then we can validate this connector by typing in archiver at fully qualified domain name. The archiver is always listening on archiver at fully qualified domain name. This is how we actually receive email to the archiver. Now that's all validated, we're going to want to go to compliance management and actually set up a journal rule. And we'll send the journal reports to the email address that we just validated with. So it's archiver at, and then the fully qualified domain name of the archiver. We'll give it another generic name so we know what we're talking about. And we're just going to want to apply this to all the messages. So just select apply to all messages and all messages. Lastly, we're going to set up the 365 mailbox retrieval. This will pull in all of the old data that is stored in Office 365 into the archive. We do this by creating a permission group, and this permission is just going to be giving the application impersonation privilege to a random user that we're going to use to get that data from. In this case, I'm going to use the archiver user because that's just a spare user I have lying around. This user can just be any sort of service account. Once you've got that impersonation account, we're going to want to go to the mail sources and 365 connector screen, put in our impersonation username and passwords. We'll select the directory service to the only one that's available, and we'll leave mails on 365 for just a week. This just simply means that anything older than 1 week, we will pick up and absorb. Tick folder synchronization and automatic mailbox sync, and validate that connector. Hit save and you're all done. At this point, you've configured all of the basic steps to get the archiver set up and working with Office 365. The only thing I would now mention is how we can now test the things that we've just done. So the first thing you'll want to do is check the journal rule and see if that's working. You'll see this because you'll start receiving live email into the system. And if you're getting that, then your journal rule is working perfectly fine. The second thing is the mailbox retrieval. The mailbox retrieval job runs at midnight every night, but you can force this job as well if you'd like. Check to see if we can pull all the users by selecting the import button on the connector we made, and if you can see all those users, then that mailbox retrieval connector is sound. The last thing you can check is the authentication, which we did earlier, which you simply just go and try and log in with an Office 365 account and see if it forwards you over to the 365 login page. I want to thank you all very much for watching. If you have any questions, please link those over to us either at our support email address or in the comments of our YouTube videos, and let us know what you think and what you need from us to be successful with this. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.